there was this feature that I watched here on YouTube. I will put a link here in the description from a Canadian news network. This particular feature shows a reporter going to the battlefield of Stalingrad. Now, for those of you that are not historically minded, Stalingrad basically was part of Hitler's plan called Operation Barbarossa. Basically, the Soviets and the Nazis had a pact, a non-aggression pact together. But eventually Hitler broke off that pact. And it's kind of like this. This is the way I kind of look at it. This is my hypothesis on it all. I don't have any evidence to back this up. But have you ever been gambling at a casino and you keep winning and winning? Each time you win, you start to get more high. And scientific studies have shown that when that happens, it is similar to a cocaine addict, the way you feel. That's why a lot of individuals who make high-risk trades on Wall Street are addicted to drugs. And so my belief is that when Hitler started going into Poland, he started going into all these areas, he started to get high and think he was invincible. And so without having the wherewithal, he simply just was like, screw this. I'm bringing the British to their knees, and the French have already surrendered, so screw it. But he was going to attempted to invade Stalingrad because of the commercial capacity. It was an industrial center where the Soviets would produce iron for their tanks, they would get fuel for their jets and their tanks and so on and so forth. The Luftwaffe, which was the German Air Force, controlled the air. Now, Stalin made it illegal for anyone to leave this area as it was being invaded. The numbers are estimated at this, but no one knows 100% because the Soviet government attempted to put a cap on the numbers, and they did not have good record keeping at the time. But basically, it is estimated that 1 in 4 Soviet troops died. You have a 1 in 4 chance. Nowhere else in the world do you have a 1 in 4 chance of getting killed. It is estimated that over 110,000 troops, Soviet troops, died in that one battle of Stalingrad. This is according to Britannica, the encyclopedia. This is where I'm getting my information from. That is more troops in terms of casualties that have died than the entire Canadian military ever. That is more troops that died in that one conflict than the entire U.S. casualties during World War II, including the Pacific. The average time of survival for a Soviet troop during that battle was 24 hours. But the Soviet held out, and it is regarded as one of the biggest pride of the Soviet Union. Imagine, though, they are still going back in this area. There's a volunteer that is a tour guide of the museum. Seems like a very smart individual that has patriotism for his country. But this individual goes on the battlefield with a group of volunteers, and he is a volunteer himself. They dig up bodies, and they're still finding skeletons with helmets that are holding guns that were casualties at Stalingrad. So still to this day, over 75 years later, that's what it said. That was the title, Stalingrad 75 years later. Now it's later than that. This was early 2000s, I think. It was late 90s, early 2000s. So now it's over 80 years. And despite that, they are still finding dead bodies. They are still finding casualties. Well, Hitler also, before that, tried to invade London. He used the Luftwaffe to stop the British ships from commercial shipping. They outnumbered the British force. It was over 4-1, it's estimated. They would even show people how to put on gas masks in case of bombings, but their city was bombed. Can you imagine? And this was called Operation Sea Lion, for those of you that want to look more into it. This is one of Hitler's plans. But the point I'm trying to make is, could you imagine being in your city one day, just living your life, playing with your kids, going to work, going to school, going to church, your place of worship, whatever that is, And then you find out that an opposing army is going to invade. You find out that you either have to leave your entire home that will most likely get burnt down, your farm will get destroyed, your entire area will be burnt to the ground, or you stay and risk your life and fight. Imagine if that happened. When I hear people say, a lot of them are not historians, they say, America is declining. The world is worse off than it's ever been. If I want to be snarky, I say, you ever read about World War II? You know, Hitler invading countries and a psychopath possibly taking over. It's probably a lot worse than you getting triggered on Twitter, right? But if I want to be more analytical, if I want to take a more analytical approach, if the individual who I'm discussing this is astute enough and mindful enough to form a coherent argument, I ask them, I say, in what metric? The unemployment rate, according to the Department of Labor and Bureau of Labor Statistics, states that 3.7 is the unemployment rate. But if you look at the population increase, we have more people in the United States than we've ever had before. 340 to 350 million is the estimation. More people are working today than ever before. And that's why the government is taking in more revenue than they did in the previous administration, because the taxes are cut. When you cut tax rates, businesses have more capital to hire people. Those people can pay taxes instead of being on the payroll of the government. They can actually give the government money instead of relying on government-issued checks. Therefore, it increases the revenue. Did the same thing under Reagan. Economics, one-on-one, folks. But the point I'm making is more people are working than ever before. 3.7 unemployment rate. Some states are even lower than that. It showed that New Hampshire was like 2.4%. So the unemployment rate is low. What about violent crime? Well, ever since the increase in violent crime in the 90s, the surge, violent crime has been on the decline. What about life expectancy? Life expectancy is longer than it's ever been. And so what metric are you using? What about threats to your security? What about war? Well, we have ended our presence in Syria. And now, before 2020, reports are coming out that are saying Trump is negotiating with the Taliban to end the war in Afghanistan. That is now the longest war over 16 years. Vietnam was 15, so it is now the longest war in U.S. history. We're getting out of that, or at least attempted to. But even if we don't, there are no new wars that have been started. What about violence in terms of mass shootings? That is true. But think about this. You have a greater chance of getting killed by peanut allergies, getting choked on a peanut. More people die from peanut allergies a year than they do terrorism. More people get struck by lightning. You have a greater chance of being struck by lightning than killed in a mass shooting. You have a greater chance of being in a car wreck. Yeah, we get in cars every fucking day, right? But we're more scared to go to the shopping mall because of a mass shooting when we get in cans of exploding combustible liquid every day going over 50 miles an hour. We're okay with doing that, but we're scared to go to the shopping mall because someone might shoot us. And yes, it is terrorism. I asked the person, I say, he wrote a manifesto. The shooter wrote a manifesto that was stating the reasons why he decided to pull the trigger. And in that manifesto, it was politically motivated. Therefore, if you're agreeing with me that it is terrorism because he was using force, violence, and intimidation for a political reason, which is the definition of terrorism itself, if we agree on that premise, then you have a greater chance of being struck by lightning than you do being killed by a terrorist. What about in terms of material wealth? Well, think about it. I was born in 1993. I'm only 26. It's not like I'm some old man. But I remember when I was a kid, what did I have? I had a computer that had Windows 98 on it. And it was a desktop computer. We would always fight. Me and my brother and sister would always fight to play PC games. The internet wasn't really widely used. But when we did have internet, it was extremely slow. It would take forever to start. And when my mom got a phone call, boom, it would kick us off, right? What about phones? We had a Bell South phone, which was in the wall. and we all had to take turns to use it. Anytime we would have to talk to a friend. Not even being that old, I have more today than I did back then. Think about this. We have a device that has more information than 1,000 encyclopedias, 1,000 Britannica encyclopedias that can fit in the palm of your hand. You can stream more music than 75 CDs, all in the palm of your hand. We have streaming services. I remember I used to like Family Matters. Well, how did I watch it? I had to record it if I wanted to watch it. I had to record it. Nowadays, you have streaming services. You can rewind it, fast forward it, pause it, rewatch it, watch what episode you want, what season you want. You can binge watch. Binge watching was not a thing in the 90s, not even in the early 2000s. I remember the first time I heard a girl say binge watch, I said, what the hell is binge watch? I was about maybe 18, 19 years old. Even in high school, we didn't have this, but I was like, what's binge watch? I never heard of that. What does that mean? But the point I'm making is that we have more wealth today. The poorest person in the United States, on average, people that have government housing, they have streaming services. They have smartphones. They have cars. They have computers. They have more in their pocket, not more in their pocket, but more in terms of real wealth, which is assets, than the richest person in 1999. I'm middle class. I have more in terms of assets than Bill Gates had in 1999. Bill Gates did not have a smartphone. Bill Gates did not have Hulu, Netflix, and YouTube TV. So in terms of real material wealth, I have more than Bill Gates. And so do you if you live in the United States. And so material prosperity is actually increasing. My dad grew up in the 70s. He said they never had air conditioning in their house. He grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. They never had air conditioning in their house. And they didn't have color TV until my dad was out of the house. And they were middle class. Think about that. It's been less than 80 years. And we went from black and white TVs and no air conditioning to air conditioning, streaming services, and all this. Because of capitalism, private property, and prosperity. But we're spoiled on the milk. We're getting spoiled from the fat of the calf. But then people say, well, we're so divided. Well, think about this. When you leave your home, when you go run at the park, when you go to the grocery store, when you go to your place of worship, when you go out to the mall, wherever it is you go, how many times do you have somebody that gets mad at you for no reason? Or if you go out of your way to be a jackass, that's different. But if you're a normal person that lives their life, how many times do you have a negative interaction? Which is hardly ever. You know, I work with different types of people. I have gay people that work with me. I have Hispanics. I have African Americans. We all get along fine. We get along fine. We joke. We laugh about the job. We hang out together. We have a good time. It's no big deal. But the media wants to create this tension between us. They want to create this division between us that does not normally exist. I remember when I would go to this park that was primarily African American, because the area I lived in was African American primarily in like the early 2000s. We all got along fine. We all shook hands. We all got along. One of my friends tells me now that, you know, they don't get along too well down there anymore. And that's because the tension being created by the media. Naturally, we as humans can get along. As long as we're working, we have prosperity, so on and so forth. We get along just fine. It doesn't exist. What the media does is I'll give you a microcosm. A lot of things in life are microcosms of how the media works. So I went to a political event a little over a year ago. At this particular event, there was over 50,000 people at this event. That means you have over 50,000 interactions between individuals. None of those interactions that I saw were negative. All of them were cordial, nice, or just nonchalant, normal interactions you would have at a bus station, or you would have when you're walking down the road, you know, a nod. Somebody nods their head or says, how are you doing? That was kind of the extent to which it was. But there were two events there that were negative. So the media, they edited out the reasonable individuals, and this was a local affiliate of NBC, working overtime for the cocksucker Brian L. Roberts, I see. The little bastard that owns this. But anyway, they recorded two negative interactions, and then they showed it on the news. of that local affiliate. My grandmother called me when I was on the way home from that event, and she's like, "Are you safe?" And I was asking her why. And this is a microcosm. See, the media will take two extreme individuals of one side, the white supremacist, dumbass racist, the communist social justice warrior Antifa piece of shit. And then they will show them on camera and try to give you the illusion that if you voted for Trump or you voted for Bernie or your political ideology is this or that you subscribe to all those individual ideas, which is absurd, but that's what they try to do. And then they show you the small little interactions. You know, anytime there's a shark attack, a plane crash, or a mass shooting, which is statistically lower than car wrecks that happen every day, statistically lower than bar fights, they show you those things. And then people are afraid to fly, they're afraid to go in the ocean, they're afraid to go out in public. But they get in cars, which you have a higher chance of wrecking in. And so that was kind of the way it works. Just stay away from the media. Be informed if you wish, as I choose to somewhat, about the economy, geopolitical affairs, and the important stuff. But limit your time on the media. Spend more time out, getting sunlight, talking to people in person, and you'll be happier. In my previous videos, I think a civil war is inevitable, not because of anything Russia, China, or a foreign country is doing, but because of the tension that is being brought on by the multinational corporations that are run by the 13 Illuminati bloodline families. And so, if we stay away from the media, if we start to interact more in person because we view each other as people instead of an entity behind a screen, we will be like Reagan did and win the entire war and each battle without firing a single shot, as Reagan did with the Soviet Union. Let's just not put drugs in inner cities like Reagan did. That was a joke, by the way, but that's my opinion. What is the metric? How is everything worse when every metric says otherwise? And quit believing the media, because they want to make you think we're all divided, the economy is bad, the world's terrible. But you step outside your door, it's not like that. War, famine, depression, everything is going to shit. You look outside, you hear the crickets, you see the trees, you live your life, and nothing ever happens.